Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm back to give you my final picks for this Week 7 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Excited to get into it. Before we do, quick reminder that if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you value any of the insight that I'm giving you, you think it's good, valuable content, if you could take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that I upload, that would be greatly appreciated. It greatly helps me grow the channel. I'll be here all NFL DFS season long. I also cover NBA DFS and MLB DFS. The World Series coming up with that, so stick around if you're tuning in or playing any of those games. And lastly, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. Sign up today using promo code KJK DFS to receive a 100% match when you deposit up to $100 today. And don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the video for my top 3 PrizePicks picks for this Week 7 slate as well. We'll go over that at the end. With all that stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and start getting into this slate. So at the top this week, without a doubt, is going to be Mr. Patrick Mahomes taking on this Tennessee Titans team that has been absolutely dreadful defensively and a very high total. When looking at this total right now, this game comes in with a 57 over-under with a 5-point spread in favor of the Kansas City Chiefs. Going to be an absolutely ridiculously good fantasy environment, and I think that Patty Mahomes is by far my top QB play this week. I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. The game that this is expected to play at an extreme pace based on my model and team stats. And then when you factor in that Vegas is lining right up with me, I'm going to have a hard time not wanting a lot of exposure to this game. And it's not like there's a lack of weapons. We have Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, etc. We're going to stack him up looking at some of his key stats on the season so far. One thing about Patrick Mahomes is we know that he will scramble. Not quite as much of the elite QBs we talked about, but he still does have a 16.88 rush share percentage overall of his team's overall rushes. And then as far as looking at my QB key stats tool here, as far as overall true passer rating, air yards per game, and all that fun stuff, Patrick Mahomes right now not really grading out as the greatest in the air yards per game. And that's a little bit surprising considering he's a guy that we typically look to really excel in that category. And I think it's only going to go up from here. I mean, looking at his true passer rating, it's still 105.63 true passer rating. And I'm really intrigued about the pass attempts. 40.3 pass attempts per game. Even though he hasn't quite had that huge Patty Mahomes performance quite yet in the season, newsflash, it's coming, and I think this is going to be the one. Patrick Mahomes, absolutely love him on this slate this week, without a doubt. I'm sure that's not going to be too much of a contrarian take, but love it. Second on the list, we have Kyler Murray, another very mobile quarterback with a 32.5 implied total for his team, a 17.5 point spread. Still really like Kyler Murray. I think he's going to be a big part of that spread, the statistics to get them in this blowout. And the thing about the Cardinals, even when they get deep into the red zone, they will throw the ball. They're not afraid to throw it with Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray also will run for his fair share. Looking at my snap count data sheet as far as Mr. Kyler Murray and his overall rush share in this offense this year, he is up there with the league leaders right now, currently sitting in 5th place with a 19.68% rush share overall in this offense. Houston Texans defense has not been good whatsoever either when you're looking at my overall QB matchup chart. The Houston Texans are the 12th best team to target in terms of QBs, giving up 20.6 fantasy points per game. And I definitely have interest in Mr. Kyler Murray in this one. Moving further along, Lamar Jackson. And one thing I on my screen, just to clarify, I do have I had FanDuel salary showing. We're going over DraftKings first here, but I do have interest in all of those same QBs, except for the fact that Mr. Kyler Murray is not on my DraftKings list, and I apologize for that. So I want to catch myself. I have more interest in Kyler Murray over there on FanDuel. On DraftKings, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford, Jalen Hurts, and I have that same interest over here on FanDuel. The one big difference for me on FanDuel is I think that it's easier to get up to the QB, so that's why I have interest in Kyler Murray. So I'm glad I caught that. I just want to clarify on that, so apologies, but I'm covering both sites. DraftKings, I have a little less interest in Kyler Murray. It's more of a FanDuel play. On DraftKings, the next guy we want to talk about, though, is Lamar Jackson at 7-4, taking on this Cincinnati Bengals team with a 26.25 implied total. Only 7-point favorites. That's, of course, going to help our case. And Lamar Jackson, we of course know he's going to run the ball a bunch. As far as his overall rush share in this offense in QBs, he's the second highest rush share as far as when it comes to QBs on the season, with a 33.68% rush share overall. We know he's going to run a lot. And one thing that people might not be factoring in is actually the fact that Mr. Lamar Jackson also is way up there in air yards per game. He currently is 4th in the league, right behind Kyler Murray with 179.83 air yards per game. 45.16 deep ball completion on 31 deep ball attempts as well. Lamar Jackson, not exactly the guy that was talked up as the top accurate arm in the world, but he can run as well, and we knew that from the start. I'm going to like him a lot. Matthew Stafford taking on this Detroit Lions team that's been absolutely terrible against the QB position. You can make an argument. It's a little bit of a revenge game, I guess you could say. I don't really think there's much revenge to be had, but Lions are 15th overall against the QB position, and they really don't grade out well against the Rams wide receivers, of course, on the outside, and the Rams are both expected to score a bunch of points in this one. They come in with a 33 implied total. I think Matthew Stafford is going to want to show out against his former team, of course, and regardless, it's just the spot. You really have to like it here on DraftKings. I also like him over there on FanDuel. He's one of those guys I'm willing to lock in on both sites. Jalen Hurts, also another guy that I'm willing to lock in on both sites at 6'9". I continue to talk about rush share being important when it comes to QBs in today's modern day NFL. Some of these guys can match the other QBs passing, statistics for fantasy on the ground as well as throwing the ball, and Jalen Hurts is one of those guys. I mean, we talked about Lamar Jackson and his rush share. Jalen Hurts is number one in the league with his rush share for a QB, and it's not even close. He has 40.15% of his team's overall rushes via his legs. That's ridiculous for a QB. I'm going to continue to play this guy. He's continuing not to be priced up. And don't get me wrong, he's had some rough games as far as, from a pure football aspect. He's gone out there and he hasn't really looked the greatest, but his price tag as far as fantasy is concerned continues to remain low. And he just does too much. He's just too involved too much on the ground. It's really hard to avoid. So then the next guy on DraftKings is going to be Daniel Jones. We talked about the 5 guys I like over here on FanDuel. On DraftKings, the one guy I would make an exception for on FanDuel that's a little bit different than the pricing there is Daniel Jones at 5'4". I think that's just too cheap for a guy that also will run a bunch on the ground. He's able to get the job done on the ground, through the air. Don't get me wrong, Carolina's not exactly the easiest opponent in the world, but bottom line is it comes down to the price tag. He's all the way down to 5'4" now. He can run the ball. As far as his overall rush share in this offense, he accounts for 23.91% of his team's overall rushes, and it's really just a price play. Anytime I can get a guy at 5'4" that can run the ball like Daniel Jones can, he's that cheap. And when you're looking at the Vegas lines overall, his team has a 20 implied total, 3-point spread. They're expected to stay in it. I think he's going to carry a lot of responsibility to getting to that 20-point mark. So that's more of a price point play. So I do have interest in him on DraftKings. And with that being said, let's go ahead and switch over to the running back position. And at the running back position this week, no surprise, it's all going to start with Mr. Derrick Henry for the Tennessee Titans taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. We talked about that high total, only a 5-point spread. This one's expected to stay close, and I have a lot of interest in Mr. Derrick Henry this week. I'm sure everyone else is going to be too after that huge week last week, huge week before, and I have a hard time not seeing him follow up because this game is a massive total. The Chiefs' run defense is not good. They're the 7th best team to target in terms of running backs, giving up 26.7 fantasy points per game. And then when you're looking at the defensive line matchup here, the Tennessee Titans have a 66% run block advantage according to Pro Football Focus on the ground. Everything's going to match up. This Tennessee Titans front should be able to push the Kansas City D-line around all game and open up the gaps for Derrick Henry. And I absolutely love this spot for him. Priced up for a good reason, especially on DraftKings, though. I don't think he's priced up enough still. And I like him a lot. Really hard to avoid. I'm sure, it's kind of an obvious statement, but all the statistics are there. They back it up. Love this spot for Derrick Henry. Second on the list, we have Aaron Jones taking on this Washington football team this week with an 8-point spread, 28.25 implied total for his team, and they're expected to get out early in this one. That's, of course, always going to make us happy. And at only 7,500 on DraftKings with Aaron Jones' ability to catch the football in a PPR format, I really do like him. 4, 5, and 4 targets the last 3 weeks. He hasn't had a huge game yet, but I think this could be the one. Looking at how the football team has fared against the run so far on the season, they actually have been a lot better against the run than they have been through the air. 24th best team to target in terms of running backs. They've been doing a good job of keeping the ball on the ground, but as mentioned, struggling through the air. I think that Aaron Jones can get involved in the pass game as well. And then when the Packers get up in this game, I'm not too worried about him not getting the volume on the ground once they get up. So I like Aaron Jones. I think the game script's going to match up well for him to maximize his upside. And the same can be said for Mr. Darrell Henderson Jr. I talked about the Rams. This offense expected to go off with a 33 implied total, a 15.5-point spread in favor of his side. And he gets to take on the Detroit Lions, who have been dreadful against the run. They are the #1 team to target in terms of running backs on the season, giving up the most amount of DraftKings points per game. 32.2 fantasy points per game given up by this Lions run defense. And then when you're looking at the offensive line matchup here for the LA Rams, huge advantage as far as run blocking here with a 70% run block advantage overall, according to Pro Football Focus. Darrell Henderson Jr., everything matches up for him to absolutely smash this week. 15.5 point spread. They're expected to get up big. When they do, they're going to need to run the ball. They have a huge run block advantage. I don't think they're going to have any issues running the ball at all. And Darrell Henderson Jr. is a guy I have a ton of interest in this week. Love Darrell Henderson Jr. for sure. Definitely willing to get him in my lineups. And he's going to be a top priority for me. Next on the list, we have Leonard Fournette, another guy that's in a good game script here with a 12.5 point spread in favor of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 29.75 implied total for his team. They're expected to get up. When they get up, that's what's going to happen. They're going to run the ball with Leonard Fournette, a guy that's been seeing a pretty good workload here as of late. You can see 22 attempts last game with a 30.7 DK point performance put up. He also saw 6 targets in that game. He saw 5 targets the game before. He saw 5 targets the game before. And everything's matching up as far as how this Tampa Bay Buccaneers front matches up against the Chicago D-line. Another great run block advantage with a 58% run block advantage according to Pro Football Focus. Love the spot for Leonard Fournette, and the price tag's too good to be passing up on DraftKings. The game script, everything matches up. Love this spot for him. And lastly, Mr. Chuba Hubbard on DraftKings. This game expected to play at a pretty quick pace here, this Carolina-New York Giants game. I talked about I like Daniel Jones. Chuba Hubbard's been getting the volume now with no Christian McCaffrey. And I think that with the way this game's expected to go, and with his workload at 6-1 on DraftKings, he's too cheap. He has a huge upside. And as far as how the Panthers grade out for their overall run block advantage here, they do have a 4% run block advantage. Not nearly as much as a good matchup as some of these guys we talked about. But bottom line is he's too cheap. He's going to get the runs, and it's not the worst matchup in the world either. I have a lot of interest in Chuba Hubbard. As far as FanDuel, my differences in the running back position, this is another position where everything matches out. The wide receiver position we're going to get into next, there's definitely a little bit of pricing discrepancies on both sites, but for both these sites, I like the same 5 guys at the running back position. Definitely be locking those guys in your lineups. Let's go to transition over to the wide receiver position. And at the wide receiver position, another position that's going to be absolutely loaded with options this week. I mean, the top 3 guys on the slate for me are very hard to avoid. I have to be getting them in my lineups. I think you got to play one of these guys in your lineups this week and then mix in some value plays other places. Davante Adams, it all starts with him at the top, taking on this Washington football team that's been absolutely terrible against the wide receiver position. As far as how they grade out, they've been the #1 team to target in terms of wide receivers. Looking at my wide receiver matchup chart, giving up 52.4 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. And we know that Davante Adams' share in this offense is absolutely ridiculous. Looking at my snap count data as far as his overall share in this offense, from a target share aspect, Davante Adams currently possesses a 36.46% target share overall in this offense. That means over a third of the passes thrown in this offense are going Davante Adams' way. He leads the league in that. Love to see it. #1 matchup you could possibly ask for. Last week, only seeing 5 targets. I think he has a huge bounce back week. This week, maybe the recent struggles will lower his ownership. I doubt it, but Davante Adams, absolute smash spot here, and a guy that you have to be prioritizing in your lineup, so it all starts with him. Second on the list, Tyreek Hill. If we're going to be playing this Kansas City and Tennessee game, guess where the ball is going to be going? Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, we know where the ball is going. These guys are going to have a huge amount of upside in this week, and as far as Tyreek Hill's injury status, that's the only thing we're waiting on. He didn't participate in Thursday's practice, and he's been present. He's been a non-participant. They're kind of expecting him to play. Keep an eye on it. It's going to be unfortunate if he doesn't play, but I mean, that's going to open up a ton of value for us if that's the case, so maybe not unfortunate, but I think Tyreek Hill is going to play. If he plays, absolute smash spot. We talked about this game environment. It's going to be ridiculous. As far as how the Tennessee Titans have fared against the wide receiver position on the season, they are the #2 team to target in terms of wide receivers. So Davante Adams, Tyreek Hill, literally the best matchups you could possibly ask for this week. 50.5 fantasy points per game given up by the Tennessee Titans. Love this spot for Tyreek Hill. The volume's there. As far as his overall involvement in this offense, looking at my snap count data and his overall share, he does possess a 27.51% overall target share in this offense. So, once again, about a third of the passes going Tyreek Hill's way. You'd love to see that. Third on the list, Cooper Kupp expected to, on pace to break the most fantasy points scored by a wide receiver in a single season, and guess what? I don't see him slowing down in this matchup. Detroit, we talked about the huge total for Matthew Stafford, and guess what? You're going to pair him up with his favorite target in Cooper Kupp because Cooper Kupp has a tremendous matchup here. We talked about those other two guys here. Cooper Kupp has the #1 matchup advantage according to Pro Football Focus this week, taking on this Detroit Lions team, even ahead of Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill. So, Cooper Kupp, other guy that you have to be paying up for this week. These three guys are a huge priority for me. I mean, it goes without saying, they're priced up for a good reason, but you got to be getting them in their lineups. And we do have some value plays as well. Mid-range, A.J. Brown, Tennessee taking on Kansas City. How can I talk about this game enough? Absolute smash spot. A.J. Brown, 6,300, too cheap. We've seen him starting to slowly but surely work his way back up to getting more involved. He's dealing with an illness, and he didn't practice Thursday as well. So Friday's going to be a big day for us. If he's out, Julio Jones' target share could go up. He could possibly be the guy that I'm pivoting to here. Like, I'll gladly give you guys updates in the comments. Leave me comments if these guys end up getting ruled out. We'll give you a pivot for my top plays. I don't mean to be giving you plays that are just out, but these are plays that I think will play for the time being, and if they do, they're just going to smash. And I think that this is definitely that spot for A.J. Brown. I'm going to love it. I think it's a breakout game for him, a breakout spot. I'm really hoping he plays because I have a lot of interest in him. And lastly, Rashad Bateman on the Baltimore Ravens. Made his debut last week after being hurt. First round pick for these Baltimore Ravens. Expected to have plenty of talent. And bottom line is he is just too cheap on DraftKings. That's the bottom line. And 3-4, just too easy to beat. He had 6 targets last week, 4 receptions. They only had 6.9 fantasy points. He really didn't have a big week, but 6 targets to me at a guy at 3,400. First round overall pick, and he's only 3,400. Are you kidding me? And then I talked about liking Lamar Jackson and being able to pair him up with a cheap wide receiver that has a bunch of talent. Yes, please. So I love Rashad Bateman on DraftKings. And then as far as FanDuel, very similar targets once again. We do have a little bit of a difference here, though. We have the same 4. Fifth one I'm going to be going with Devontae Smith based on his price tag over here. Too cheap at 5,800, taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. And we talked about having interest in Jalen Hurts. Well, guess what? His #1 target on the outside here, Devontae Smith, is just too cheap. Looking at his price tag over here on FanDuel. Devontae Smith, 5,800. Love him on FanDuel. I think that's just too cheap. 4, 9, 10 targets and 2 times a 4. Last week he had a bit of a rough game, but at 5,800, that's just too cheap for me on FanDuel specifically, and I do like Devontae Smith. I mean, I like him on DraftKings too, of course. I'm not giving you guys plays I don't like, but the pricing discrepancy really makes him stand out a little bit for me on FanDuel. And let's go ahead and transition over to the tight end position. And at the tight end position, no surprise here. It all starts with Travis Kelce. I talked about this Kansas City game a bunch. I'm sure you're going to hear about it all over the place all week long, but for good reason. This game has the highest total by far. The target share in this Kansas City Chiefs offense is very condensed. We know exactly where the ball is going. It's Travis Kelce. It's Tyreek Hill. He was limited on Thursday as well, so once again, we're going to have to keep an eye on the injury report, but I think he's going to be good to go here. 11 targets last week, 10 targets the week before, 8 receptions, 6 receptions, 17 DK points plus both weeks, and I think he can have his biggest week yet alongside Tyreek Hill. So Travis Kelce, all starts with him here, taking on this Tennessee team that just can't defend anyone. As far as how they grade out as far as the tight end position, they are the 31st best team to target in terms of tight ends. So you can make an argument to maybe fade him if you want to be different in tournaments because the tight ends have been good against the tight end position. I wouldn't advise that. There's a reason he's in my picks. I think he's a tremendous play. But if you want to make an argument against it, there would be your argument. Sure, feel free. Mark Andrews, second on the list. We talked about Lamar Jackson. We talked about this Baltimore offense. We like this Baltimore offense. Mark Andrews, the guy getting targeted heavily within it at $6K on DraftKings. I think he is too cheap for his role, and I like the price tag quite a bit here. 13, 6 targets. Last week with 1 touchdown. The week before, 2 touchdowns. Continuing to get work. As far as the Bengals and how they fare against the tight end position, they've been the 25th best team overall. Bengals secondary really not that bad. It's really just a matter of the price points on these Baltimore guys that are making me like them. And Mark Andrews falls right into that line as well. Like him, Dallas Goedert taking on the Las Vegas Raiders. They shipped off Zach Ertz, so that should make Goedert be the clear tight end option now for these Eagles as if he wasn't already. And he didn't practice Thursday despite being activated from the COVID-19 list. So keep an eye on that. I expect him to be able to go once again. And we have a lot of injuries on this slate, so we have to keep an eye on the news. But I'd expect him to be able to go at 4,600 on DraftKings with his target share. No more Zach Ertz in the mix. I do like him. And speaking of Mr. Zach Ertz, want to have interest in him this week. Making his debut for Arizona, taking on a Houston team that has been the #1 team to target in terms of tight ends. They're giving up 19 fantasy points per game as tight ends. Haven't been able to get the job done. And I think that Zach Ertz, if he's good to go here and play, which I expect him to be, I expect him to take off here. I mean, I think they're going to want to get him involved early in this Arizona Cardinals offense. I think he's too cheap. I don't think that Kyler Murray's ever really had the talent of a tight end like Zach Ertz. He should be wanting to go to him early and often, and for that reason, I like him. And the fact of the matter is, that's just too cheap on DraftKings. And the same rule is going to be applied for Ricky Seals-Jones. If he's able to go. Once again, we have a questionable tag. I'd expect him to be good to go. Logan Thomas, ever since joining the IR, has been filled in by Ricky Seals-Jones. And he's really stepped in well to this role. 9 targets, 6 targets last week with a 15.8 DraftKings point performance, and I still think he's too cheap at 3,700 taking on this Green Bay team. They're expected to have to play from behind in this game. I talked about liking Aaron Jones, liking Devontae Adams. If I'm running it back with someone, I think Ricky Seals-Jones makes a lot of sense in this spot, so he's definitely someone that I'm looking to. As far as FanDuel, it's pretty much the same thing, except for the fact that I would be prioritizing Darren Waller as well, because FanDuel's pricing is just too soft. It's just too easy to get Darren Waller in your lineups. Running back with your Philadelphia lineups as well. I talked about liking Mr. Smith over here. Well, guess what? You can run it back with Darren Waller on the other side with Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, and you have an easy run back option that you know is going to get a bunch of volume. He hasn't really had that huge game yet. Target share still there. I think he could be due for it, and I do like Darren Waller this week. So that's all of my picks here. Before I let you guys go, though, we got to go on over to Prize Picks and give you guys my picks there as well. All right, and going over to Prize Picks as far as my top picks this week. The first one, I'm going to go ahead and go over to the running back position and highlight a guy that we talked about a lot in this video that I really like in this spot, and that is going to be Darrell Henderson taking on this Detroit Lions team. We talked about how LA is expected to get up early here, 8.5 rushing yards. The game flow matches up for Darrell Henderson. The talent matches up. And like I talked about, the offensive line is a huge advantage here with the 70% run block advantage for the LA Rams. Everything's matching up for Henderson. He should get plenty of rush attempts later in the game as well. Love Darrell Henderson for the over rushing yards. So he's going to be my first pick on Prize Picks. And my second pick, going to be another guy we talked about in the video, and that's going to be Davante Adams receiving yards, 95.5 over. I like the over in this spot for Davante Adams. 95.5 receiving yards, don't get me wrong, that's no small number, but when it comes to Davante Adams, in this matchup, like I said, it doesn't get much better. The football team's been absolutely terrible in the secondary. Looking at Davante Adams' overall air yards per game, he is second in the league in air yards per game with 127.66 air yards per game, 16.7 air yards per reception. Also being targeted on contested targets, we know Aaron Rodgers will force it in there. We already talked about targets going his way about a third of the time. Love this spot for Davante Adams. Love him on Prize Picks, locking that over for him. And lastly, my third pick is going to be Patrick Mahomes. I'm going to go with the over, 325.5 passing yards. Once again, a very hefty total, but let me tell you what. This game has a close total. Not expected to blow out whatsoever. And Patrick Mahomes, yet to have that big game. I think he's going to absolutely blow up as far as, highlighting this game's total. A 57 over-under. The game's expected to be at a tremendous pace here. 31 implied total for his team. And I think Patrick Mahomes is just going to go absolute nuclear in this spot. Love him. Make sure you get him in your lineups. And he is my third Prize Picks pick this week. Sign up today. Use promo code KJK DFS to receive a 100% match up to $100. Cash in those 3 picks. Cash in your money for this Week 7 slate. And that is all from me in this one. If you did enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future content that I upload. That would be greatly appreciated. Wish you guys all the best of luck in this Week 7 slate. Don't forget to check out the rest of my KJK DFS premium content as well. Link below in the description. You get access to all the same tools that I use in building my own lineups. So you're seeing some of the sneak peeks on the screen. Top stacks tool, all that stuff over there. Check it out. And we will see you in the next one.